5:46, this is Greatest Hits Radio. Another smart speaker to give away very shortly. Don't forget the Confessions podcast arrives every Friday. Matt isn't in last week's podcast, but your verdicts are... Yeah, absolutely.
My verdicts are. Oh,
yeah.
right.
Well,
yes, I'm going to forgive.
Those kind of things.
Yes, yeah.
So they turned up, which was great. So get that podcast. Also, grab something from the trolley as it goes trundling past. What are we taking today, Suze?
I'm taking 3 cocktails called a Tom Collins. This is just for Matt. He'll love this one. It's dry gin, bit of lemon juice, bit of sugar syrup, and topped with a soda. So a very delicious gin cocktail. I'd pick Plymouth, but you can go with whatever gin you like.
Yes,
very delicious.
sounds very nice.
Is that all right for you?
Tom and Collins. Yes, sounds good.
No, not Collins. Tom and Collins.
Tom and Collins.
Tom.
Excellent.
Tom
That's what
Collins.
we all heard. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
So here we go with today's confession, which comes from Inga from the bottom table. That's how it's signed, okay? Inga from the bottom table.
Okay.
Father Simon, Brother Matthew, Sister Susie. Back in the 60s, aged 16, I got a job as a clerk
Telephonist?
telephonist.
Yeah, that's the word.
That's right. Clerk telephone.
Let's just answering the phone.
I had to answer the phone.
Yeah.
I was a clerk as well. At a farm equipment store.
Right.
Some of the customers were from what you might call the Hooray Henry set, the kind Matt used to hang out with back in the day. All tweed, teeth, and entitlement.
Yep.
They were a bit intimidating for a village girl like me. This is your crowd, isn't it?
Very
really?
much.
Yeah. Thankfully, the owner's daughter was lovely, kind, down to earth, and she clearly had a soft spot for the staff, so much so that she invited me to her wedding.
Wow.
At a rather posh country club. I went, of course, and was seated at what could possibly be described as the bottom table, near the toilets, with an alcoholic uncle, a family friend who was crazy in a nice way, and a cousin who told risque jokes all night.
Excellent.
Imagine.
Like it already. Yeah.
That's like your worst evening possible. And it's the 60s. At the time, my own cousin and her husband were doing a Nina and Frederick tribute act. This is a dated reference to an old 60s and
Nina and Frederick.
Nina and Frederick.
Yeah.
Do you not remember them?
No.
Yes, they did they had a few hits.
Did they?
Yes.
I mean, hits?
Yes, they did.
Really?
Yes,
okay.
they did.
Hits.
Yeah. Such as, do we know any of these hits? No, we don't.
It's before my time.
Okay, right.
Something to do with a donkey.
Probably weren't hits then.
As I remember,
Okay.
there was a donkey involved.
Donkey?
Yes.
My Little Donkey?
Wow.
No. Okay.
Anyway,
Yeah.
the point is, it was like a husband and wife tribute act. That's what my cousin and her husband were doing, and it doesn't really matter, to be honest.
No.
She kindly loaned me one of her stage outfits, a posh frock and a long blonde wig. That's what I was wearing for the evening. Emboldened by this costume and perhaps a bit overawed by the surroundings, I made a rather questionable decision. I decided to pretend that I was Swedish, and I would not speak a word of English all night. Yes, for the entire evening. I spoke in the style of the Muppets' mad Swedish chef. I answered every question with early bird, jag forste inte Benny and Björn, chickeny, shrimpy,
Oh dear.
Ingrid Bergman. And then I'd add a little broken English and say a little early bird, and then accompanied by a universal finger and thumb gesture. Shrimp.
Hurdy birdie chicken, yeah. Yeah.
But you get the general idea.
Yeah, no, we do. Yeah.
Things are going well. I have to say, this takes a very unusual, if distasteful turn.
Oh, well, I'm glad we've set it
yeah.
up with the Swedish thing.
That's right.
Right.
Well, the thing is, the Swedish thing is sort of misled everybody. So, things were going surprisingly well, says Inga. I was causing no harm, people seemed amused, and I was actually enjoying myself. That is, until the speeches were over and the night was halfway through. The groom, who was silently getting absolutely plastered, made a beeline for me. I accepted one polite dance, but quickly realised he wasn't taking the hint. He was persistent. Thankfully, the crazy friend of the family turned out to be fiercely protective and got between us more than once. All seemed fine until I went to get my coat. I was in the corridor when the groom cornered me and started murmuring about a quiet room nearby and, quote, what an exotic Scandinavian flower I was.
Oh dear.
At this point, I'd had enough, and I dropped the act. I lowered my voice into a Yorkshire growl, which, Father Simon, was similar in a way to Ray Winston.
Oh, that's handy.
No, of course it was.
And this is what I said.
Yep.
Oi, you rancid pig. Put your hand back in your pocket before I snap your fingers. Anyway, the look on his face was priceless because he thought I was Inga from the bottom
Yeah, of course.
table.
Yeah.
So he looked as though he'd been hit with a shovel, which would have been a good idea. I made my escape. I left the job before the bride returned from her honeymoon, but word soon got back to me. The marriage had not lasted.
No,
There's
imagine.
a surprise. The groom had been found in a compromising position with a maid whilst on the honeymoon.
Classic.
Apparently it had been a shotgun wedding. Literally, Vanessa's father had a shotgun. Sorry,
What?
never mind. Had a shotgun. I think the groom had been hoping that Vanessa was going to cancel because he couldn't. Anyway, it was all very complicated. But Father Simon, I need forgiveness from this woman at work for acting the fool at her wedding. However, in my defence, my actions did not do as much damage as the gormless groom. My friend deserves so much better. Yours, Inga from the bottom table. I was a fan of the Swedish, I have to say. I think any reference which gives me an opportunity
Yeah. No, crack that one open, yes.
to go with the Swedish chef.
yeah.
One of my favourite Muppetry
Definitely.
characters is always a good thing.
Chicken, yeah.
Ja, första harmado, shrimpy.
Slimpy.
It sounds like you're talking backwards.
It does.
Oh, I can do that as well.
Yeah.
Sister Susie, what do you say?
Well, I don't really understand why she needed to be Swedish, because, the woman had let her attend her wedding and obviously had befriended her, so why couldn't she just be herself? So I don't really understand that bit, and she should just been herself, and then maybe it wouldn't have happened. But the groom sounds like a wrong end, doesn't he?
He does,
And so for
yes.
that reason, I agree with her completely, and I forgive.
I think it was because she was dressed as Nina from Nina and Frederick, and she had a blonde wig, and she just thought, well, I'm going to go for it. I'm just going to be Swedish.
Nina had a blonde
no
wig.
idea.
Oh, we've
I'm
no
gonna
idea, have we? We don't know anything about
No.
Nina and Frederick. This huge couple that had massive hits.
I'm going to look them up in
Never.
just a moment, and
Never.
I shall quote all their hits to
Right,
you.
great, that'd
And
be
one
great.
of them would involve a donkey.
Thank you
Definitely.
so much.
Matthew.
Yes, so I'm going to forgive. I mean, hardly a marriage made in heaven, this one, really. And it sounds like certainly she's better off without him. He sounds like a bit of a cad. Who was wearing a wig to a wedding? I don't think that's normal. I've never worn a wig to a wedding, or indeed at all. So for all of that, and because of the Nina and Frederick nonsense, I'm going to forgive.
None of that made any sense.
It made
No,
as
it
much sense as the other
Welcome
ones.
back.
People's verdict, please. Forgiven or not for Inga from the bottom table. 61054. First word is Simon. So just before the news, little confession from Inga from the bottom table. A story of a marriage, a wedding, a Swedish accent, which was lovely, I think, all the way through, and a groom who was a right pillock.
Yes.
And was rather objectionable. Anyway, the verdict is in. Here we go.
Easy to forgive this one, says
Yes.
Charlotte in Kings Lynn. The groom was a disgusting bloke, and it sounds like she told him what's what. But not forgiven, says Mike. Why on earth did she pretend to be Swedish at a wedding? People take weddings very seriously. She sat there doing a silly voice, wearing a stupid wig. Groom did sound like a nightmare, though. And Samantha in South London says, forgiven. How did he not realise she was wearing a wig and that the accent was fake? I love the Muppets mentioned, though.
Yes. You see, I think I've done this. I think
What? You've done
went to a pub and pretended to speak a foreign language, which I just made up on the spur of the moment.
Why would you?
I don't know. It just seemed like a kind of thing that you do when you're 18.
You're sophisticated?
Have we all done that?
No, I don't think we have.
Anyway, if you have a confession, maybe inspired by today's tale, and you fancy getting a smart speaker, which you'll get if we use yours, send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And the drinks trolley is just coming round, and Susie's picking something rather splendid, I imagine. What are we going for today?
I am. Well, I think this will be more one for you than for Matt, but
Yeah.
it's a kombucha, lemongrass and ginger, and it's called Luck Up by Counterculture. And they do very lovely kombuchas, but yeah.
That's very good.
probably pulling a face.
Matt, can I have yours?
You can have mine. Yeah.
It's very good
Yeah.
for your gut.
Oh, that's
It
nice
is
to
good
know.
for your gut.
It is, absolutely. You need to take notice of these things. You need to look after yourself
Yeah.
as you approach old age.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
Right, today's confession comes from Nina. Thank you, Nina. Not Nina as in Frederick, but this is a different Nina.
Different Nina. Okay.
Doesn't have a wig.
Who knows? Who knows at this point? Because names have been changed. Father Simon, Brother Matthew, and the Sisters of Mercy. Firstly, I love the show.
Good.
Only recently rediscovered it and have been spending most days working my way through the back catalogue of your Confessions podcast.
Nice.
So very good. Well, we've been here for a number of years now, so that's a lot of work to be done. I need to get something off my chest, something I did over 30 years ago when I was 11 in music class. And this has haunted me ever since. I have never told anyone, not even my dad, who was an unwitting accomplice, and it's been sitting in the back of my mind like a guilty little metronome ticking away through my life. We had been set a task to compose a short piano piece and be ready to perform it in front of the class. In true lazy child fashion, I decided I didn't really want to do this piece of work. I could probably focus on my attention on keeping my Tamagotchi alive. This was the important thing in life.
Yeah.
I can't quite remember. I do remember the panic that set in when the homework was due the next day. But being a pragmatic and intrepid child, I had a solution. My dad used to make up little musical pieces on our piano at home. Nothing fancy, but he knew his stuff. There was one particular tune I really liked, and so I asked him to teach it to me for my homework. And he beamed and happily complied. It was kind of dark and dramatic. It sounded clever. It sounded technical, sort of emotional in that storm clouds gathering kind of way.
Oh, I like it. Yeah.
That's the kind of language Matt always uses to describe the music he's like.
Yeah.
So I thought, this is perfect, I'll play that. It was a bit of a fib, but hey, it's only Year 7 music and I can breeze through it quickly and everyone will be none the wiser. Thanks, Dad. So fast forward to 10:45 a.m. I'm sitting in the school piano, at the school piano, not in the school piano.
Not in it.
Because that would be a little bit... I'd definitely failed from there. Hands a bit sweaty, heart thudding. I bash out the piece with as much flair as I can muster, and it went really well, Father Simon. No missed notes, no collapsing into nervous giggles, just me and the music. At 1, I was incredibly pleased with myself and turned towards the class who were viewing me with envy. Then I noticed my teacher, Mrs. Harding, who was looking at me with the kind of look that would curdle milk. "Did you write that yourself?" she asked. She was also a witch.
Yes.
Nice.
She was looking at me with a kind of look... Oh, no.
Curdled milk, I believe. Yeah.
She asked me... Sorry. "Did you write that yourself?" She asked again.
Yeah.
One eyebrow making a break for her hairline. I froze. Kinda, yeah, my dad helped me, like, a bit, I mumbled. There was a long pause. "I see," she said. Her lips were pursed in the way a witch does. She didn't say anything else. I added the witch bit, by the way.
Yeah.
She didn't say anything else. She just looked at me witheringly and made a note in her book. I returned to my seat, cheeks burning, absolutely convinced my dad had just got me into trouble, but nothing happened. So I assumed she had just been struck with shock and awe at the 11-year-old prodigy that she just witnessed before her. And I got on with my life and I probably forgot about the whole thing. Years later, I was in the car listening to the radio, half tuned out, rude.
Right.
We don't just knock this stuff off, you know. Well, we do, actually.
Yeah.
When suddenly I heard the very melody that I'd played that day in class, the one that I had written with my dad's help. Same kind of drama, same stormy chords. Hey, I thought, my dad wrote that. How on earth were they playing my father's music? What was happening? Perhaps he had a secret side hustle as a composer. And then the announcer came on and said, written to celebrate Russia's intervention in the Serbo-Ottoman War. That was Tchaikovsky's Marsh Slav, performed by, and then mentioned the orchestra and the conductor. I nearly drove off the road. Turns out my dad had just been playing full-on Russian classical music at home, and I, in all my 11-year-old wisdom, had tried to pass it off as my own work. And the look Mrs. Harding had given me now seemed to convey not shock and awe, but the weary resignation of a woman who'd spent her entire career being serenaded by meddling little Mozarts who thought they could sneak one past her. Well, they couldn't. And Father Simon, I don't seek forgiveness from my father, who never thought to mention that the piece of music he was teaching me wasn't his own, but was Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky. So really, I only did the very same thing that he did. So the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But I do need to ask for forgiveness from Mrs. Harding, if indeed she's still out there. Not for cheating, as in fairness, I didn't exactly know I was cheating. not to that extent, but for having the absolute audacity to waltz into class and pretend I'd written some Tchaikovsky. I didn't even know the Serbs and the Ottomans had had a war, or that the Russians had taken part, though they do tend to do that, or that Tchaikovsky had seen fit to compose a number about it. And just as a side note, my dad and I have always bonded over our shared love of music and our time spent jamming together on the guitar. Very good. I think that's evidence in mitigation there at the end from Nina. But anyway, let's see what Sister Susie makes of that torrid tale.
I do like it, Nina, and do you know what? It kind of is doing the same thing, isn't it? My mum used to say, what's in the roots comes out in the branches, and you know, your dad didn't tell you that he didn't make that up, and it was someone else, and you didn't tell your music teacher. So what I think you've learned really is you got distracted and you didn't do the task that you should have done, and you should do your homework, and for that reason I can't forgive you.
Yes. Brother Matthew.
Well, I'm going to forgive, because in a way he did actually learn a piece of music, didn't he? He learned the one with the Marshlavs and the Tchaikovskys. And you know, Dad was just helping out, and I think that the music teacher knew what was going on as well. So in a way, they all came together, and for all of those reasons, it feels to me.
What are you talking about?
No one got anything wrong, did they? So well done to Nina. So yes, definitely forgiven.
Okay, right. Well, that made less sense than
Maybe
normal.
more than I think, yeah.
People's ready, please, for Nina. Forgiven or no? 61054. First word is Simon. The verdict is in on tonight's confession, which we had just before 6 o'clock, which came from Nina. A squalid tale of fake Tchaikovsky winning at school. I think that's not a very good thing to be doing. But anyway, he passed off on the dad because he'd borrowed it from Tchaikovsky, so everything was fine in the end. Matt has the people's verdict, I think.
Not forgiven, says Mick. He should have produced a piece of music himself instead of sponging off his dad. But Sam says forgiven. Writing a piece of
Nina's
music.
a girl, by the way, so...
Yes.
Not sponging off his dad.
No.
Unless Tchaikovsky was sponging off his dad.
Could be that, couldn't it? No, it's not. Sam says, forgiven. Writing a piece of music is really hard. I used to dread composing in music lessons. I would have done exactly the same thing. And John in Bournemouth says, easy to forgive this. If you're going to copy your composition off anyone, you might as well copy off one of the greatest composers of all time.
Yes, even if your music teacher might go, I think that sounds like Marsh Slav by Peter Ilyich Tchaikovsky. And reflecting the Russian intervention in the Serbo-Ottoman
War,
which has been under discussed on Greatest Hits Radio so far this week, or this year, or ever, in fact. Your confession, please, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And it's time, very fortuitously, for a little bit of light relief from the drinks trolley. What are we selecting today, Sue?
I've gone for a very delicious, very summery, a soft pink pet nat, made by from a Pinot Noir as well, which is very interesting. Just tastes like summer, basically. It's a Peded Castello. Matt can correct me if I'm wrong there, but it's very delicious.
How would you say it?
Ped de Castello.
Ped de Castello.
There you go. That's very good. Okay, I'll have a half. Thanks very much. We'll indulge later. So today's confession comes from Sheldon. Thank you, Sheldon. Brother Matt, Brother Simon, Father Simon. Anyway. Father Simon, Brother Matt, Sister Holly and Sister Susie. I am writing to ask for forgiveness from the Holy Father and the sisters and the brother. Okay, get on with it. I am taking you back to my early 20s. So we're in the 1990s and we're in the Isle of Man, when I was a young, impressionable and carefree person. But, it didn't take much to make me blush. That's the point, okay? I will call myself Sheldon for this confession to protect everyone. The story starts as I was out walking on a sponsored walk for a local charity, along with a beautiful coastal walk around the island, taking in the lovely views of coastlines and the sea on a blistering warm summer day. You should know that Sheldon can clearly be a woman's name as well as a boy's name. Of course,
yes.
And in this case is a woman's name. My friend and I had stopped to have lunch at a quaint cafe, and both my friend and I were flirting with these lovely guys. We're going to call them Michael and Philip, and they sat with us, telling us that they were on a training day out and had stopped for lunch and refreshment. As we sat there talking, they asked would my friend and I like to meet up with them at the local bar. So of course we happily agreed to meet at the Creek pub in Peel that night at 8 p.m. This is all very nice and very
specific.
cosy, very lovely. As we waved them goodbye, we set off to continue our walk and to catch up with the others who were also escorting us. It was a lovely warm summer's day and we drank lots of water and unfortunately had forgotten to go to the toilet before we left the cafe, and we knew that we were meeting Michael and Philip soon and we didn't want to be late. And as we walked along the final part of the coastal walk, I decided to save time at the end of the walk and not to miss the coach collecting us all. And I would take a loo break right now in the bushes so as not to miss the coach.
Okay.
It's one of those confessions.
Yes.
Oh, no.
And my friend, who we will call Izzy, wasn't too sure about taking a loo break in the bushes, but I said, "Oh, don't worry. There isn't anyone around. It'll be fine. And what could happen to us in the middle of nowhere?"
Okay.
Stand true.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for details.
Yeah.
We don't want to be late for meeting the lads later, do we? No, of course we don't. So after some convincing, we both went into the bushes and checked that there was no one around. So we crouched down
Yeah.
and proceeded to
Yes. Okay. Yep.
take the required
Yes.
procedures.
Understood.
However, to our horror, the bushes started to move.
What?
And there was a rustling noise. This was bad enough, but then we heard laughing. We couldn't see anyone, and then suddenly the bushes moved again, and like it was a Doctor Who episode, all of a sudden the greenery started to rise up in front of our eyes. We couldn't believe it. There in front of us was the army in combat disguise,
Army.
with branches over themselves.
Oh, no.
It's not Doctor Who, it's Dad's army. And the camouflage had made them invisible.
Goodness.
They were hidden in the undergrowth on an army training session and had been there the whole time. Well, both Izzy and I quickly made the required recoverings and ran out of the bushes and all the way to the coach. Such total embarrassment. But then to our horror, the army lads were standing right next to our coach and giggling. And I said to Izzy, "It can't get any worse, can it?" And then as we were about to get onto our coach, there leaning against it were Michael and Philip, dressed in army combat gear, smiling at us and saying, "See you later, ladies." They had also been in the bushes and they'd seen us both in the undergrowth. And
Oh, dear.
I mean, Father said we were mortified. Please can I ask for forgiveness for my friend Izzy, but not the lads for this. Not the lads, because although we never met up because we were so mortified, we decided never to do that ever again.
No.
And Izzy never let me forget what happened, although we still laugh about it to this day. I do ask for forgiveness now, as she has recently met up with I'm not quite sure if you're going to get this. She's recently met up with a really lovely guy through a dating app, and she doesn't realise that this is the guy that we both met all those years ago. Not the one that she really liked, is the other one, but I haven't told her that, and I should have done, and I want to ask for forgiveness from brothers and sisters. Now, I'm assuming from what she's saying that this is one of the army guys. That's my reading of it. So the guy that Izzy has met on the app is one of the army guys who saw her go
Goodness
in
me.
the bushes all those years ago.
Does he know?
Well, I don't
Got
know.
lots-
This seems
got a
like a
lot of
preposterous
questions.
thing. It is like Dad's army and Doctor Who all happening at once. Sister Susie, what do you say?
Yeah, I do feel for Sheldon here, because when you need to go, you got to go, right? But unfortunately, you don't go in a bush, do you? To
Well,
go
what
in a
else?
bush?
Where else are you going to go?
But she didn't want to hold up the coach, so she could have just gone. Surely coach places have got toilets, so she just could have said, "I'm here. I just need a loo." I'm sure the coach driver would have wanted her to go to the loo because he doesn't want her to be. Maybe there was a toilet on the coach as well. I'm not going to go into it, but I feel sorry for her. But I feel like she could have planned better, and I'm not going to forgive.
It's the Isle of Man in the 1990s. I don't think they had such
Clearly.
things. Brother Matthew.
I mean, how big are these bushes? Are these bushes, are they on top of them? I don't understand how that's, I mean, it's very, very good camouflage there by the army. I'm going to forgive because, I mean, you could not have seen that coming, really, at all. There's no way you would get caught short and then think, better look out for the army, because you know what they're like for being camouflaged as big bushes. And what a twist at the end. Didn't see that coming. Turns out one of them has tracked her down after all these years. Good for
that's
him.
slightly sinister,
A
actually.
little bit sinister, maybe not so good for him. So, for all those reasons, I'm going to forgive.
Okay. Right, so it's the people's verdict, please. 61054. We're going to do the verdict slightly earlier today. 61054. People's verdict is in then, slightly earlier than normal, but Sheldon gets what kind of verdict here?
So Gary in Liverpool says, easy to forgive this one. How are they to know that a bunch of army people would be hiding in the bushes? But Marty says, not forgiven. Who goes to the loo in the bushes? It's gross and not good behaviour at all. But Rachel in Worthing says, forgiven. Poor Sheldon. We've all been caught short on a walk, and peeing in the bushes is the obvious thing to do. She must have been terrified seeing the army blokes in there.
Yes, I think that's probably right. Thank you very much indeed for the verdicts, and thank you for the confessions. Send them to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. The Confessions podcast will be with you tomorrow if you are a subscriber, and I do recommend that you are a subscriber, because it turns out, and scientists have proven this, that people who subscribe to the Confessions podcast are the smartest people around.
I've heard that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Just grabbing something from the drinks trolley. What do you think we should be refreshing ourselves with today?
The sun is shining through my window and getting very jealous of being stuck outside. So summer to me is cider. So I've gone with an alcohol-free one. It's a high sobriety. It's raspberry cider and it's alcoholic-free, 0.5%, juicy, fruity and delicious.
There are so many reasons not to drink raspberry cider.
Okay.
I would have thought.
There's loads of reasons to drink a raspberry cider.
Yes, but also
tasty.
I then listened to the way you described it and I've changed my mind.
Change your mind.
There
Good
you
for
go.
you.
So I had one view and now it's changed.
Yes.
On the basis of evidence.
Yes.
Excellent.
So today's confession comes from Corporal Jones. Father Simon and the gatekeepers of high morality. I write to you with a guilt that I can no longer bear on my own, and if nothing else, need to confess my disgraceful behaviour to the benevolent collective to enable me to achieve some kind of closure regarding a sin that took place in the early 90s while serving as a soldier in the finest cavalry regiment in the world in Germany. Now, I am keenly aware that confessions from members of our fine armed forces are rarely broadcastable.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
Definitely
Making me
true.
nervous.
So I have kept the details of this heinous sin as presentable as possible so it may be heard by the collective and met with grace and kindness and perhaps find some forgiveness, however unlikely. Get on with it, Corporal Jones.
Yes.
For the protection of those involved, I've kept my name anonymous. You can call me Corporal Jones. Remember, please, these were different times. This particular day, I'd been given the important yet mind-numbingly boring honour of being the camp's guard commander. Now, this job involved booking people in and out of camp and ensuring that the guards secured the main gate and carried out regular armed patrols to protect our comrades whilst they slept. This job, whilst very important, was extremely dull, to say the least, and this is where the problem started, because after many hours on duty, my idle brain was in overdrive. The guard changed every 2 hours, which involved taking the new guard outside to a small sand pit behind the guard room and supervising them unloading their weapon. Once they were all loaded, they went off to the gate to replace the men on guard, and the relief guard would return to the unloading bay, where I would supervise them and ensure that their guns were unloaded and safe before returning to the flea-ridden accommodation of the guards room. One particular trooper, let's call him Sheepy, turned up to be unloaded after his 2 hours in the sun. Sheepy was so called because he had an unusual type of white hair. It looked like a freshly shorn sheep all the time. Coincidentally, he also smelled of lanolin, which was odd. Anyway, Sheepy had been in the regiment for a few years, which is why it surprised me that he actually carried out my request without question. So after unloading his weapon, as he was about to head off into the guard room for some well-earned rest, I stopped him and thrust a sealed envelope into his hand and told him that he needed to go to the pay office and hand in this note that he must not return until he gets an answer. To explain to you, the pay office was effectively the regimental bank and was manned daily by one of the pay clerks. Getting a claim or access to your own money over the small counter hatch was rare and often met with disdain from the clerk. Let's call our clerk Pete the Pay. So off went Sheepy the short distance to the pay office hatch, where I stealthily manoeuvred myself into an office doorway where I could observe the ensuing calamity. I should point out at this juncture that Sheepy was still carrying his rifle as he dutifully and without emotion thrust the envelope into the hands of Pete the Pay and said, "I need an answer now." Pete the Pay opened the envelope and his face went very pale and a bead of sweat ran down his furrowed brow because, Father Simon, with regret and it's a moment of madness, I'd written in large capital letters, "This is a stick-up.
Oh, no.
Give me all your money."
Oh, dear.
After a great deal of commotion and some shouting, Sheepy was released and allowed to return to the guard room, but only after being asked Who sent you? Sheepy didn't hesitate and sang like a canary, and I was dutifully summoned to the regimental sergeant major's office, a gruff man, of course, but not without a sense of humour, where he congratulated me on a good prank and with a smile put me immediately on another 5 guard duties, day on, day off. Now, Father Simon, I don't seek forgiveness from Sheepy. He was clearly gullible, especially when just a few months later, I sent him with an envelope and a shovel back to the regimental sergeant major. This time the writing said, "Give me 10 days leave or I'll hit you over the head with a shovel."
Oh, my goodness.
So I'm afraid he deserved it. And I also received a further 10 guard duties for my sins. But I do seek forgiveness from Pete the Pay, who unexpectedly took the prank very seriously. And he must have thought it was armed robbery. In my defence, I went on to serve a full career doing my duty in both Gulf Wars and numerous tours of Bosnia and Iraq and becoming a regimental sergeant major myself. So I wasn't all that bad. I look forward to hearing the decisions of the gracious and forgiving collectiver, however unlikely. With much regret, that's from Corporal Jones. I mean, I must say, Sheepy, if... to fall for the same thing twice, and to go to the regimental sergeant major with a spade and expect to get away with it, I think Corporal Jones might be right in that Sheepy's not the brightest lad in the regiment. Anyway, Sister Susie, what do you say to Corporal Jones?
Well, Sheepy might not have been the brightest lad in the regiment, but that doesn't mean you have to be mean to him, does he? You could have, you know, helped him in other ways. I just think you was very funny though, but a bit mean, and you know, you let your mind wander, and that's where you went wrong, Corporal Jones, and you should have been concentrating on what you were doing and doing a good job, and for that reason I'm not going to forgive.
Give me 10 days leave or I'll hit you over the head with a shovel.
Yeah, very funny.
Brother Matthew.
Yeah, that second one, that's what swings it for me. I'm definitely going to forgive, because it was pretty mind-numbing work, wasn't it? Important work, but very mind-numbing work, and you've got to find some way to dispel the boredom. Could have played a game. Good point, but not with live fire. Yes, there are many reasons to forgive, and I'm going to go through them at length because we're now playing music. But I've decided no, I'm just going to forgive because it's Thursday night. So there you go. I forgive.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
that could have gone either way, really.
Good. Yeah.
People's verdict, please. Do you forgive Corporal Jones for his misdemeanours? 61054. Just before the news, we had a confession from Corporal Jones, a story about a cavalry regiment in Germany, a fake bank robbery, and a sergeant major with a shovel. That's essentially what was happening, and the people's verdict goes like this.
Not forgiven, says Shelley in Norfolk. Poor Sheepy. It's not his fault he's not the sharpest tool in the books, but he doesn't deserve silly pranks being played on him. But Tanya in Cambridgeshire says definitely forgiven. I remember people being sent to stores for black light bulbs and striped paint in my first job. Obviously, I was never caught out with such shenanigans. And Pete from the Royal Engineers says, oh lordy, confession tonight, totally forgiven. Ex-sapper here, so many guard duties done over the years. Very dangerous territory indeed.
Yes.
So forgiven.
Thank you very much for the verdicts. Thank you for the confessions. You can send yours to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.